Have you ever noticed that your worst emotional moments don't happen when life is objectively falling apart, but when something small pushes you just a little too far? A delayed message, a careless tone, a minor mistake, and suddenly your chest tightens, your thoughts race, and it feels like something inside you has hijacked the steering wheel. You know logically that this reaction is too much, yet in the moment, logic disappears. This isn't because you're weak, broken, or overly sensitive. It's because most people were never taught how emotional regulation actually works beneath the surface. Today, we're going to talk about the real reason emotions feel uncontrollable, why common advice fails, and how emotional regulation isn't about calming down, but about rebuilding trust between your brain and your nervous system. If you stay with me until the end, you'll understand your emotions in a way that permanently changes how you relate to them. Most people think emotional regulation means staying calm, being positive, or controlling how you act when you're upset. That belief alone is why so many people fail. Regulation doesn't start at the moment you feel overwhelmed. It starts long before the emotion explodes. What you're experiencing during emotional overload isn't a character flaw. It's a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Your brain is constantly predicting danger based on past experiences. When it senses threat, whether physical or emotional, it shifts power away from thinking and towards survival. In that state, reasoning feels inaccessible not because you lack discipline, but because the system responsible for reflection has been temporarily overridden. This is where most advice goes wrong. People tell you to think positively, reframe your thoughts, or calm yourself down while your body is already in emergency mode. That's like trying to negotiate with a fire alarm while it's blaring. Emotional regulation is not about silencing emotions. It's about teaching your nervous system that it doesn't need to scream to be heard. When emotions feel intense, it's usually because they've learned that intensity is the only way they get your attention. To understand this, you need to stop thinking of emotions as problems and start seeing them as signals. Every emotion is trying to communicate something about safety, boundaries, or unmet needs. When you ignore these signals repeatedly, your brain doesn't stop sending them. It amplifies them. This is why suppressing emotions works temporarily, but backfires long-term. Suppression teaches your nervous system that only extreme reactions break through. Regulation works in the opposite direction. It teaches your system that subtle signals are enough. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to regulate emotions after judging them. The moment you tell yourself you shouldn't feel this way, your nervous system hears rejection. That rejection creates internal conflict, and conflict escalates arousal. Emotional regulation begins with allowing the emotion to exist without immediately trying to fix it. This doesn't mean indulging it or acting it out. It means acknowledging its presence without resistance. When your brain feels acknowledged, it naturally begins to de-escalate. Another reason emotions feel overwhelming is because they're often carrying more than the present moment. Emotional reactions are rarely about just what's happening now. They're influenced by memory, pattern recognition, and previous experiences that taught your brain what to expect. When something feels disproportionately painful, it's often because your system is reacting to a pattern, not a single event. Regulation involves slowing down enough to recognize this layering. When you understand that an emotion is referencing the past as much as the present, it becomes less confusing and less threatening. There's also a misunderstanding about emotional intelligence that needs to be corrected. Emotional intelligence is not about being endlessly patient, understanding, or calm. It's about accuracy. It's about recognizing what you're actually feeling instead of collapsing everything into anger, anxiety, or numbness. Many people say they feel angry when they're actually hurt, ashamed, or afraid. Anger is often the body's way of creating distance from vulnerability. Regulation improves dramatically when you learn to name emotions precisely. Precision reduces intensity, because the brain no longer has to shout to get the message across. Stress plays a major role here. When your nervous system is chronically overloaded, your window for regulation shrinks. Things that would normally feel manageable suddenly feel unbearable. This is not because your coping skills disappeared, but because your capacity was exceeded. Emotional regulation is deeply tied to rest, boundaries, and recovery. You cannot regulate emotions effectively in a system that never feels safe enough to stand down. That's why emotional work without lifestyle support often fails. Your nervous system needs evidence that safety is possible, not just reminders to stay calm. Relationships are one of the most powerful testing grounds for emotional regulation. Close connection activates vulnerability, and vulnerability activates threat detection. This is why emotions often feel most intense with people you care about. Regulation in relationships doesn't mean never reacting. It means learning to pause before assigning meaning. When emotions are unregulated, the mind fills in gaps with assumptions. A short reply becomes rejection. A neutral tone becomes criticism. Regulation allows you to separate what you feel from what you know. That separation creates space for curiosity instead of defensiveness. Trust in yourself is another overlooked outcome of emotional regulation. When your emotions feel unpredictable, you begin to doubt your own reactions. You question your perceptions and second-guess your responses. Regulation rebuilds trust by showing you that emotions are temporary and manageable. Over time, you stop fearing emotional intensity because you've experienced yourself moving through it without losing control. That confidence changes how you show up in every area of life. One of the most powerful shifts happens when you stop trying to eliminate difficult emotions and start focusing on how you relate to them. Emotions are not instructions, they're information. Feeling anxious doesn't mean something is wrong. Feeling sad doesn't mean you're failing. Regulation teaches you to carry emotions without being carried away by them. This is where flexibility replaces rigidity. You become less reactive not because you feel less, but because you understand more. Long-term emotional regulation is built through repetition, not insight alone. Every time you pause instead of react, every time you name an emotion without judgment, every time you allow discomfort without rushing to escape it, you're teaching your nervous system a new pattern. These moments may feel small, but they accumulate. Over time, your baseline shifts. What once felt overwhelming becomes tolerable. What once triggered spirals becomes a signal you can respond to thoughtfully. The goal is not emotional perfection. It's emotional resilience. It's the ability to experience the full range of human emotion without losing your sense of agency. When you develop this skill, emotions stop feeling like enemies and start feeling like guides. They point you toward what matters, what hurts, and what needs care. Emotional regulation doesn't make life easier, but it makes it clearer. And clarity changes everything. If there's one thing to remember, it's this. Your emotions are not the problem. The problem is the relationship you were taught to have with them. When that relationship changes, so does your experience of yourself. Emotional regulation is not about control. It's about connection. And the more connected you become to your internal world, the less chaotic it feels. If this perspective resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on which emotion you tend to resist the most. Not because it's wrong, but because it feels unsafe. That emotion is likely carrying important information you haven't been taught how to hear yet. Learning to listen is where real regulation begins.